Where's Don when you need him?
4 years and 1 month ago, we had our first service at Faith Family. 4 years ago, we had our first Sunday of Advent together. And those of you who were here may remember that we talked about the book of Isaiah, because we have so many of the most beautiful readings in this part of the book of Isaiah. And you remember the second Sunday of Advent, we had a quiz on 1st Isaiah, 2nd Isaiah, 3rd Isaiah. Do you remember that? So I ask you, is this 1st, 2nd, or 3rd Isaiah that we read from today?
What's the number?
You got a 33% chance.
You got a shot at it.
First.
And the number that comes after first is second. Yes, it's 2nd Isaiah.
Second, but I'm only heard the chapter.
It's in the bulletin.
It's under my music.
And it's the time when the Israelite people are moving from having been in captivity out of exile and back in toward the promised land. And so we hear in these verses both despair and hope. But I think we hear in this particular reading today from chapter 42 some of the most gentle words. This part that we read here from Isaiah 42, the first 7 verses, is known as the first servant song. There are actually 4 servant songs in the book of Isaiah. And so we read about the servant of God. And as I was reading through this and reading over it again and again, I also was thinking about, and it's World AIDS Day. How do we bring all of these pieces of our lives together on this day? And I found some hope and some despair in what I read about what's happened with HIV/AIDS in the last 25 years. In 2012, 35.3 million people were living with AIDS. Hope or despair? They're living with AIDS. 75 million people have been infected since the start of the epidemic. It's estimated 36 million have died from it worldwide. There is a 33% decline in new HIV infections since 2001, and a 52% decline in new HIV infections among children since 2001. The peak year for deaths from HIV/AIDS, anybody want to guess? This surprised me. The peak year for deaths, 2005. 2005.
Wow.
Yeah. 2.3 million died in 2005 from HIV/AIDS and related illnesses. In 2012, last year, that was down to 1.6 million. It's a lot, but it's fewer.
Amen.
Last year, $18.9 billion was spent in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Think about the early 80s, when we had people in seats of power and decision-making that would spend nothing.
Yes.
9.7 million people with HIV in low and middle income countries now have access to antiretroviral therapy.
Amen.
Yes. There's a 96% reduction in the infectiousness of HIV with treatment.
Amen.
That's amazing.
Amen.
But with our hope, not necessarily despair, but that with which we need to continue to work. 41 countries, territories, and areas in this world still impose restrictions on entry, staying, and residing in their country because of HIV status. And there are 5 countries who totally ban people with HIV from entering or living there. HIV/AIDS was first noticed in the U.S. in 1981 when 5 gay men died from a rare pneumonia. The following year, cases were found among women, babies, hemophiliacs, and people who had IV transfusions. This year, World AIDS Day and the commemoration of World AIDS Day is a call for an end to discrimination against people living with AIDS. And I call this congregation to help end discrimination anywhere we find it against people living with HIV/AIDS. That's our call. It's an old call we have from Isaiah to be God's servants, to be about what's right in this world, to be in right relationship with one another. Imagine you are this individual about whom God says, "Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen, in whom my soul delights." Did you notice all the I's and my's and me's in those 2 verses? You are so intimately part of God's love and God's loving plan in this world. I have put my Spirit upon you all, that you will bring forth justice to the nations. Justice, because we will stop bullying where we see it. Justice, because we will stop discrimination where we find it. Justice, because no one is born, as somebody posted on Facebook yesterday, racist. No one is born ageist. No one picks on us just because we're old people. They're not born that way. No one is born with any ism gene. Somebody teaches us all the isms. And we are called to stop the isming in this world. We can bring justice to this nation and to other nations. Partly we do that through prayer, praying for the people of Bangkok who are suffering violence. And partly we do it by being who we are called to be. Last week, Paul calls us to gentleness. And this week, what do these verses speak to, if not gentleness? My servant will not cry out or lift up his or her voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed, my servant will not break. I think that counts for sea oats too. And a dimly burning wick, my servant will not quench. If you were ever a Cubby Scout or a Sprout or a Brownie, you may have tried to start a fire with 2 sticks. You know how easily they go out. But God's servant would not put them out. My servant will not grow faint or be crushed until my servant has established justice in this earth. And we begin by choosing, each of us, all of us, every moment, to either be in right relationship or be in the process of getting in right relationship. We don't have the option as God's servant, as God's holy people, as the beloved in whom God has filled us with God's own Spirit to say, I'm sorry, I don't want to be in right relationship. Let somebody else do that. Give me a different job. We are all called to that. And God gets that we don't do it perfectly. So, if we're not there, as long as we're getting there, we are the servants of God. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out. Remember that when you look at the stars at night. God stretched out the heavens. And even though they appear a little bit colder in northern Indiana, they're the same stars, night after night, faithfully blinking down at us. Do you take the time to look at them? God spread out the earth and what comes from it. The flowers, the shrubs, the trees, the sand, the surf. The animals that we have chosen to domesticate and those that have chosen to domesticate us. And all those who live around us. The amazing birds that soar or come and feed from the grass. The mourning doves that come in a flock, not to be fatigued by Noah every day chasing them away. All those gifts of creation are for us. How many did you count on the way here today? How many did you see? They're all here for us. And if you ever work with the dying, which I've been fortunate enough to have that experience more than once, they never say things like, gosh, I wish I had one more vacation at Vegas. Not picking on anybody. Or I wish I had a bigger car, a grander home. They say things like, I wish I saw another sunset. I wish I could see one more time the sun rise over the ocean or set over the mountains. I wish I could hold someone's hand just a moment longer. That's what's important. All of these are our gifts. And Isaiah brings them to us and says, you know, kids, they're all here for you. They're all here for you. And the line that took my attention all week long, I am your God. I have called you in righteousness. We would say right relation. I have taken you by the hand. And what brings tears to my heart? And kept you. This God knows us. All the screwed up messes we are inside, all the times we failed and wish we had done better, all this selfishness and self-centeredness that's still in me. And yet, God takes us by the hand and keeps us. The first Sunday of Advent is traditionally in the church the Sunday of hope. It is up to us to be the messengers of hope, to be God's hopeful people, not only to those people living with HIV, AIDS, or any other illness, or any other issue or condition that tends to limit people. It is up to us to bring the hope that is God's gift to all of us. And the hope is in knowing what we know. We are God's beloved. We are God's beloved. Look in the mirror and say that. I am God's beloved. No one can take this right relationship from me. I have to give it away. Be people of hope and of gentleness. Be gentle with yourselves. Take the time to look at the stars. And as I was noticing this morning, take the time to let that 18-year-old old dog of yours sniff every smell he wants to smell. He's 18, for goodness sake. The vet told him this week, you know what, Josh? Joshua, another name for Jesus, Joshua. Gift of God. He says, you know what, Josh? Dogs don't live to be 18.
He can't hear him.
That's right. He can't hear him.
Can't hear you.
He can't hear him. And he can't see out of that one eye, but I'll tell you what. We've got this tough love vet that every week that Josh goes to see him, Josh gets 2 treats, not 1. Take the time. It's Advent. It's Advent. It's the time when we're pulled toward rushing around and being crazy busy. But there are so many gifts that we can't buy at Bell's. 25% off, $10 if you go online. There are so many gifts. Give those gifts this Christmas. Give the gift of yourself. You are God's good gifts. Amen.
Amen.